Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Conservative, not bitter indeed, my friends. Welcome to today's program. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you today. We're going to talk today about the latest, developments regarding the SAVE Act, which we've talked about here on this program over the course of the past couple of weeks. It is in the Senate now, and of course in the Senate there's the filibuster. Republicans don't have enough votes to get past the filibuster, but do they? That's the question we're going to explore here today. In fact, we hit on this a little bit, a couple of weeks ago. But Chip Roy has actually said this is how we can keep from eliminating the filibuster and still pass this legislation with a majority of Republican senators. So I'm going to break that down today. I'm going to talk about the Democrat opposition to the SAVE Act, and also want to play for you, time permitting here, play for you a soundbite of Chuck Schumer, who was 30 years ago basically talking, using terms, using arguments that actually sound a whole lot like people on our side of this, on the side of requiring identification to vote in federal elections and so forth. Anyway, that's what we're going to do today, my friends. I appreciate you joining me as well. And so that's what we're going to do. That's where we're headed. That's what we're going to do today, and I appreciate you joining us. By the way, at the conclusion of the later in the afternoon, there's a free email that goes out. This is for those who want the receipts, I guess. There's this program is a conversation. We talk about this casually. We get into it, right? I mean, we get into the issue, we talk about it, but sometimes I can't get into it to the level I want to during this program. And so at the end of every day, we have an email that goes out around 5 or 6 p.m. each weekday Eastern time that summarizes the show, that gives the receipts for those who want to dig deeper. It presents it's a more, structured presentation of what we discuss. It's digging deeper into things that we couldn't get into. It's something that you can easily forward or reference as you want to dig deeper as well. This is for the folks who want to have a deeper understanding. Look, I'm a firm believer. That, folks, this country was made great because of ideas that we accepted. We are not genetically superior to anyone else. Yes, this land is a blessed land. There are some things about this place physically, the country, the land that we're on, that is a remarkable thing. And we've been separated from a lot of the risks and threats around the world by 2 large oceans and all that sort of stuff. And there's the Great Plains and the mountains. I mean, there's a lot of things. Resources, there are plenty of resources here, especially after the purchase of Alaska and all that stuff. A lot of beauty here. And we have some things that are going well, but there's places in the world that have similar things or parts of that. What makes this country great is the ideas. And whether or not we are A, that we understand them, and B, that we're able to explain them to the next generation. That's why Reagan said freedom is always a single generation away from extinction. We don't pass it along in our bloodstream. We don't just inherit it because we were born here. It has to be something that we understand. It has to be passed on from one generation to the next. And that passing of the torch, so to speak, metaphorically, can stop at any moment. There's nothing that guarantees the next generation is going to embrace this. In fact, if you look at where we've headed over the course of time, we've seen people move further and further from accepting liberty and instead calling for government to step in and to save us or whatever else, to give us the answers to all of our problems, to take money from the rich. I saw a post yesterday on X. I can't remember who it was. It listed the top billionaires in America. It said, here's their net worth. Here's how much money they gave to charity in whatever year, one of these recent years. And it's a small percentage next to their overall wealth. And the post said, this is why we have to take their wealth, basically. We're entitled. I mean, these ideas are antithetical to Western thought, to the way that this country was founded. And that stuff doesn't happen. People need to be told the truth and have these things explained to them. And as as I talked about on the Todd Talk today, the public school systems are an absolute and utter failure. They're being led by radical leftists who, at least in one school district, allegedly have forced a teacher to resign who's taught there for 14 years because he dared to make a social media post that says, "Go ICE," talking about immigration's and customs enforcement doing their job and deporting people in accordance with established U.S. law. And so if truth is silent, it is filled. Those voids are filled with lies. And these are lies that the left is all too happy to fill with their own nonsense. And it is, listen, there's a siren song on the left, right? It's something that's appealing to people. You're not in the position you're in because of anything that has to do with you. It's someone else's fault. They've taken away what is rightfully yours. The billionaires, the millionaires, these other business owners, they're to blame. That's right, they're to blame for whatever you're dealing with. And so if you just elect me, I'll go and take from them. I'll give to you. I'll give you free this, free that. All you have to do is vote for me. All the while, because people aren't, again, naturally just superficially anyway, the way that people, the starting point for how most people interpret life, just what they see on the surface. A lot of people never dig deep and don't understand that they are voting for tyranny to overtake their lives. And so that's what we're fighting against here. That's why we'll talk about the SAVE Act, but it's also why we do the Inner Circle newsletter to help pass along that explanation, those deeper understandings, to help explain the why, to help give further context, to try to help this country continue on its path. And so if you want to get that, toddhuffshow.com, just sign up for the Inner Circle newsletter. It is, in fact, free. So we'll talk about some of these things in more detail there that I can't get into. But that's the direction I want to talk about the SAVE Act. We talked about this recently. In fact, if you go back and look at the archives of the shows that we've done in the past few weeks, you'll find that we talked about the SAVE Act and the Save America Act. The SAVE Act is specifically designed for the part of the process where people register to vote. This is not something that is designed to impact or change what happens on election day when you go to the polls. There's no requirement here to hand in a photo ID. What it does, however, is that it requires documentary proof of U.S. citizenship when someone registers to vote in federal elections. So these are elections, of course, for President of the United States, for U.S. Senator, for U.S. Representative, House of Representatives member. And so if you're going to vote, register to vote for those, the U.S. The government says, we're going to set laws. The Republicans have said, we want to make sure that you're a citizen. You shouldn't be able to just vote because you have an ID and you checked a box that says, I'm an American citizen. That's right now what happens on these registrations. And so typically, you would have to provide a passport, a certified birth certificate, naturalization certificate, or other form of government-issued proof that you are a U.S. citizen. That's what this law is saying. In order to get this, in order to register to vote, you have to prove through one of these ways that you are a U.S. citizen. Now, I'll tell you, you've heard me talk about this. You heard me complain a little bit about this. I have gone through the rigmarole, and I believe my real ID is supposed to deliver today. I had problems with this. I had to, the first time I went back probably, I don't know when that was. That might have been a year ago, 6 months ago. I don't know. I went to get the real ID at the license branch. I thought I had everything I needed, but because, well, they needed a Social Security card for me for some reason. Turns out I needed to replace my Social Security card, so I didn't have what I needed. Now, I will tell you, I think that a lot of this is silly. They couldn't use my license, my driver's license at the license branch to issue my real ID. However, to get my Social Security card, all I had to do was give my driver's license. So I don't understand the logic here, but whatever. That's the only way I could do it. I'm telling you, whatever requirement that is in place in the SAVE Act cannot have created more difficulty for me than I just had and some other people. It's just my experience. It's what I ran into problems with this. So this is I wasn't targeted. They were simply the rules. As a self-employed person, it's a little bit different sometimes to check some of these boxes and meet certain requirements and so forth. And if you're a W-2 employee and all that, and that's fine. I'm just saying I didn't feel like I was targeted, and the people who are asked to provide these things to register to vote are not being targeted either. So that's what this legislation is about. Right now, if an applicant signs up to vote, they just check an attestation box that says, I certify, I promise that I'm a citizen in the United States and that I can vote. This legislation also provides some mechanisms for maintaining the voter rolls. It provides procedures that allow states to use federal data sources, cross-checking databases, and they can remove non-citizens from their voter rolls. The SAVE Act does not. Again, this is passed the House. It's now in the Senate, but there's not 60 votes, and we'll get to that in a moment. So this prevents a little bit of a problem for Republicans. But if you follow Chip Roy's argument here, which we'll get to, the question is how much trouble does it really cause? So what this does not do, it does not create a national photo ID requirement at the polling place for casting ballots. This is about verifying citizenship during the registration process. That's what this is. Again, there's another piece of legislation called the Save America Act. I personally, as I talk about the steps here that are being recommended for how this piece of legislation can pass, I find myself wondering, why don't they just do this for the Save America Act instead of just the SAVE Act? Anyway, we'll talk about those things as we get through the program here today, my friends. But friends, there's a lot of confusion out there about Kratom. You've heard the headlines, you've read them, you've seen them, and most of those are based on synthetic junk that isn't real Kratom at all. It's being pushed by people that are shady sellers who don't have integrity and who aren't offering a natural product. They're pushing synthetic blend, and that's not good. But real Kratom is natural. It's tested. It's handled with care. That's exactly what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. Family-run company. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. Every batch that they provide is tested for purity. There's no chemicals. There's no fillers. There are no shortcuts. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations. And it's a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that's a mile long. Now, this is there are some states, including Indiana, where kratom is not legal. In most states, it is. It's a regulated product. Indiana has considered and is considering making it a regulated product. And so we're just trying to help educate and give people options and tools, especially if you're in a state where you can get it. Of course, you can go to Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com, get their Kratom Starter Pack with coupon code Todd Huff. You'll save 10%. If you're from a state that doesn't currently make it a legal product, you're at least aware of this and understanding that this is something that has helped a lot of people around the country. And there could be legislation coming soon to your state that would make it legal and regulated. So for more information or to place your order, Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com is where you go. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. Okay, so here we are back to the discussion here. So the Constitution, one of the things the left has said is that Republicans want to federalize elections. They want to take them over. Now, part of this, Trump did say the U.S. wants to federalize elections. But again, the devil is in the details here, right? Context is king. Nuance and interpretation matter. Trump is calling upon Congress to actually live out the powers that it has. Article 1, Section 4, the election clause in the U.S. Constitution says this: the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. So that says the times, places, and manners for holding these elections are managed by the state legislatures. That is not U.S. Congress. Those are the state legislatures. Then there's a semicolon and there's this three-letter word, B-U-T. But the Congress may at any time, that means whenever, by law, that means passing laws in accordance with how it was framed in the Constitution, they can at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators, when the founders wrote that's back when legislatures were selecting senators. That's how it used to be done. Now, of course, senators are voted on just like representatives, except for everybody in the state votes for a senator versus everyone in a district, which is an area within a state, votes for a representative. But the federal Congress, the U.S. Congress, absolutely can make or alter such regulations. So it says not just make laws pertaining to these elections. It says it can alter the regulations. It can step in and say, hey, these are the rules. We've set the standards nationally, and you've got to comply with those. That's what this says. So states may do the initial regulation and the details and the management, but Congress has the authority to override and say these are the key components on how we're going to run election. Make or alter is the equivalent of legislative power in the affirmative. They can do this, number one. It applies to federal elections. The Supreme Court, by the way, in an opinion written by Antonin Scalia, who was one of the shining examples of what a Supreme Court justice was supposed to be. Of course, he passed away several years ago, but he wrote that this power for the legislature that it has over federal elections is paramount authority. So they have the power, my friends, to do this. Don't let the left lie to you. So Chip Roy has a plan on how to handle this. And we've hit on this before. We've actually talked about this. We talked about this. I remember talking about this years ago, the way that the filibuster is handled. So really quickly, there's a rule in the Senate. The Senate Rule 22. It's the filibuster rule. The filibuster rule is just a rule. It's not something that's written into the foundational bylaws of this country in the Constitution. It's not in statute. This is just the Senate rules. They vote on these rules each and every new Congress, which is every 2 years. They can change their rules whenever they got to follow the rules for changing the rules, but they can change them whenever they want. But Senate Rule 22 is this little thing called cloture. Cloture is a vote that formally ends debate on an issue. And for cloture to be invoked, for that to happen, it requires 3/5 of senators, as this says here, duly chosen and sworn. That's normally 60. And cloture stops debate. So what a filibuster technically is the insistence on continuing debate over a particular issue. However, back in the day, you might have seen, in fact, Spartacus, Cory Booker, he did a fake filibuster. We talked about this. I don't remember exactly when he did it, but he broke the record on a filibuster. But it wasn't even a filibuster. It was just a performance. It was bad political art. It was just terrible performance. But it was a fake filibuster. He just talked for 25 hours or something like that, breaking the previously held record, and we acted like, the media acted like this guy was a hero and did something great, like he climbed the top of Mount Everest solo without any oxygen or something. This guy, they act like this was the greatest accomplishment in humanity, but it wasn't even a real filibuster. He just gave a long speech. A filibuster is when you're debating an issue and someone takes to the podium and they continue debate. Now, debate is used very loosely here. They often would read from a phone book or just anything to not give up the floor. But that's not how this is done today. There's something called the zombie filibuster, the fake filibuster, which I'll get to, which is what we typically allow the other side to do today. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how this law can be passed through the Senate without actually getting rid of the filibuster vote. Friends, ever noticed how some families seem to have a plan that lasts for generations? That is not by accident. Full Suite Wealth works with people who want their wealth to make a difference for years to come. Their team brings together high-level investment strategies like private equity, private credit, and option strategies, coupled with expert legal guidance. It's all about making sure your vision becomes a reality for the people you love today and in the future, my friends. If you're looking to do more than just manage your money, if you want to leave a mark, if you want to build something lasting, take a look at Full Suite Wealth. FullSuiteWealth.com is their website. Jason and the team there will take great care of you. Build your legacy, my friend. Secure your future. Time out for me. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Yes, it's really called the zombie filibuster. It's not even a real filibuster. Back in the day, you used to have you had to go and talk. You had to hold the floor. You had to continue debate and actually filibuster. You had to really do what Cory Spartacus Booker was pretending to do when he did his fake filibuster last year, whenever that was. You actually had to do that. Now, the rules are not enforced the same way. The rule is still the same, but if Chuck Schumer comes over to Senator Thune and says, look, you don't have 60 votes to move this past a filibuster, they just say, okay. And nobody has to continue debate. Remember, this is a legislative tool, but the idea here of the filibuster is rooted in the idea of more debate. I mean, if you're in the minority and you don't like a piece of legislation, at least in theory, or one way of looking at this is you've got the opportunity to go to the floor of the U.S. Senate and explain why this piece of legislation is bad. That's at least part of this. I know it's a tool that's being used to give the minority in the Senate more power, but that is certainly one thing. If you're right, if you think an issue is bad and you're trying to stop it, you would want more speech about it, wouldn't you? I would. But we don't make them do that at all today. We give them the ability to have the zombie filibuster, so no one has to go out there and hold the floor. But back originally with the filibuster, Before the modern cloture was established, and we have this zombie filibuster, this fake filibuster, senators had to actually retain the floor. If they stopped speaking and no one else sought recognition to speak, that ended debate automatically. And the majority could move procedurally to call the issue to a vote. And it just took a simple majority at that time to vote for the issue to pass. Now, this required physical stamina, and I know the average age of someone in the U.S. Senate is about 140, about the average age of a person who's collecting Social Security per Doge in their audits. I'm kidding, but you understand what I'm getting at here. So physical stamina is a thing that matters here. Minority had to constantly hold the floor. They could do that by speaking and then someone else asking to be recognized and all of that to hold the floor, but you couldn't just say, hey, you don't have 60 of us to go along with your bill, so we're not even going to show up. That's not the way that it goes. And so Chip Roy is out here saying, look, there is a way to handle this. There's absolutely a way to handle this without changing the rules. You've heard people talk about getting rid of the filibuster, or at least changing how it's used and so forth. Chip Roy says, look, we don't need to get rid of the filibuster to pass this legislation, to prevent that scenario that I just laid out from happening. All we have to do is be strong. Now, let me pause. Let me pause and say this. You've heard me say on this program, if you've been listening, we've been on for 10 and a half years now. And I remember I started in 2015. Trump and I started in I'm talking about politics, but we started at roughly the same time. Trump came down the escalators in June or July of 15 in Trump Tower. I started this program August 10th of 2015. Those are totally unrelated things, but it's interesting to me that he's been in politics for as long as I've been doing this. And he's actually the perfect example, because if you were to ask me, and in the early days, I had these very conversations on this program. The two problems that conservatives like myself had with Republicans were these two things. One, they weren't really principled conservatives. Or two, maybe they were principled conservatives, but they were wimps. And so you ended up oftentimes having to choose a candidate who really wasn't a conservative in principle, or he or she was, but they just didn't have the strength to deal with the amount of hatred and negative press and everything else that comes along with being a conservative. And it was maddening for someone like me, because I kept saying that we would have loved to find someone that we can get behind. And lo and behold, that was happening simultaneously to me saying it without my even knowing it at first. Didn't take long to see it, but we found a guy who started saying things and didn't care about what the media said about him, how they tried to frame it, or anything else. That 2016 primary, where there were 17 Republicans, and then there was Trump. It was Trump versus the politicians. It was a beautiful thing to watch, and we got to see what it looked like to have a candidate who wasn't scared. He wasn't a principled conservative, but he wasn't scared. And most of the core things that he believed in were easy check marks for conservatives like me. And so he became, to me, the obvious candidate to deal with these problems. But this has been a problem, a long-standing problem for Republicans. They've been weak. I think some have now been inspired by Trump, although I will tell you, when Trump lost in 2020, you could see how quickly the Trump effect changed or left members of Congress. They became, not all of them, but a healthy chunk of them, lost a little bit of that bravado and that fearlessness. So I don't know the long-term ramifications of this. Trump's in office for 3 more years. But we need more Republicans who are principled conservatives, but also who are not afraid of a fight, not afraid to do what has to be done, not afraid to wield the political power at their disposal. That's what ultimately upset me with my state senator Rod Bray here. He didn't do that. He took the cowardly way out. He doesn't seem to fully understand or appreciate or maybe care about the real battle that's being waged here. The left will do anything that they can to stop Republicans. Republicans will do anything they can to not defeat Democrats for some reason. It's just a bizarre world to me, but that's where we are. So when Chip Roy says this, part of me's cheering, but part of me saying they don't have the strength to resolve, not all of them, to do this. So I'm looking here, article in thefederalist.com. Headline here says, exclusive Chip Roy lays out how Senate could vote on SAVE Act without nuking the filibuster. I'll get to that in a moment, friends. Let me just remind you, if you're concerned about your heart's health, if you have a history of high cholesterol, your family does, maybe you do, but if you're getting older like the rest of us and you just realize, you know what, I need to take better care of myself proactively, let me recommend you check out Solti. Solti is an all-natural, clinically proven dietary supplement that lowers cholesterol. It's lowered cholesterol for a lot of folks, may be able to do the same for you. Solti.com is the website, Soltea, Solti.com. Promo code Todd is going to get you 50% off your first order and free shipping. It's very affordable as it is. The discount even makes it more affordable. You can test it out for 3 months. You can try it. Some folks even you can have your cholesterol taken before and after you've started your 3-month regimen to see how it's impacting you. The only thing you have to lose are those high cholesterol points. Solti.com, Soltea, promo code Todd. Get you the free shipping and 50% off your first order. Solti.com, promo code Todd. All right, so here we go. Representative Chip Roy, representative of Texas, sent a letter Monday to senators laying out a simple way safeguarding American voter eligibility. My goodness, that is a mouthful. The Save America Act can be brought to the floor for a vote without nuking the filibuster. Now, let me say here, I think that they've confused this here. There are two bills, the SAVE Act and the Save America Act. As I understand, this is just regarding the SAVE Act. This is just for the registration. When you register, you have to provide documentation. So, but this says here the SAVE Act would require both documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote and voter ID to cast a ballot. That, I believe, is the Save America Act. So maybe they are working on the one that has both elements here. I get conflicting information here if I'm being candid. But the legislation passed the House, is stalling in the Senate, despite 50 Republican senators who co-sponsor or support the Save America Act, according to Roy's letter, which was exclusively obtained by the Federalists. As Roy pointed out, Senate Majority Leader John Thune can put the bill on the floor anytime. Roy, preempting talking points from some Republican, lays out how Thune could successfully bring the Save America Act to a vote without nuking the filibuster. He explains that as long as all Senate Republicans who have either co-sponsored or publicly supported the legislation show up and present a live quorum, it would force the Democrats to talk nonstop to delay a vote at just 51 votes, rather than the typical 60 threshold filibuster. The commonly accepted 60-vote filibuster threshold to shut off debate is the only way to force a vote in the Senate. The majority can force opposing senators to speak, Roy said. So I want to pause there. But basically he's saying what we've been talking about here. Hey, don't just give them this zombie filibuster where they can object in theory, make them actually hold the floor. I got to take a timeout, my friends. Quick timeout, back in just a minute. So maybe they are pushing the Save America Act. It's one of the things, these bills are so closely named. The SAVE Act, the Save America Act. Again, the primary difference is the Save America Act also includes the voter ID. The voter ID portion of this. So that's good. That's what I think should happen. What I was reading initially referred to this as the Save America Act. You know, when you read these things and reporters are in a hurry and you have two bills that are named the same thing, Even sometimes they're using them interchangeably. They're not interchangeable. They are similar, but one of them includes the voter ID. Anyway, I think we're talking about the one that includes, it matters for the sake of what they pass, but for the sake of the discussion of how to do it, it doesn't matter. So Chip Roy's out there saying, look, if you can get a quorum, which is 51 senators, then either the Senate must either be voting or a member must be speaking. That's under the current Senate rules. So this applies, a lot of things happen. In fact, even locally here at our school board, there's been some things that people talked about here recently. And, board members can talk to one another individually, but there's only 5 board members. If there's 3 that get together or at a town council or whatever, if a majority gets together, that initiates a quorum. That's a session. You have to either be in a public meeting at that point or a legal executive session, or you're violating you're violating the way this is supposed to be done. And so basically, if 51 senators get together, they've either got to be voting or someone must be speaking. And so Chip Roy says, look, if you're together and you've got a quorum, and all we need are the people who have signed on as co-sponsors to the Save America Act, right? You got to look past the politics of this, not just go back to your constituents and say, look at how hard I tried. Let's actually try hard. Let's actually do the hard work. Let's actually prepare for a long night in the U.S. Senate. So he says, look, if no one is speaking and a quorum is present, the vote on the pending business happens automatically. So again, you can see why the filibuster matters. The filibuster basically says, and what he's saying here, I can't get into all of it here. That's why, again, I have the newsletter, which you can sign up for at the website, toddhuffshow.com, which will dig a little bit deeper, and I'll explain this a little bit better. Just there's elements of time here. I'm using the spoken word versus the written word. I can't show you links to art, different things like that. But I will say this: this is a procedure that makes perfect sense, but it requires that you have the character, the commitment to see this through. Maybe not sleep for a while. So you can convene a session of the Senate. You can initiate, again, I'm going to use terms here that I can't really explain right now, but you can enforce the 2-speech rule, which basically says in a legislative day, which is not a 24-hour period, legislative day goes from the time the Senate is convened until the Senate is adjourned. And if that could be days, and if each senator can only speak twice, you eventually reach the point where they can't do anymore. How many people are going to speak for 25 hours, right? They've got 47 senators. I guess in theory they could meet for 47 days or some such. I don't know. But that's not going to happen. They're going to run out of gusto. Someone's not going to be speaking. The majority, no one stands to be recognized to speak and to physically filibuster. They can call this to a vote. And that's what Chip Roy is saying they should do. Now, Chip Roy's in the House. Forgive me if I said senator earlier. He's a representative basically calling out the Senate here. Hey, why don't you just simply do this the way that you can do it without changing the rules? Don't tell us you don't want to change the filibuster rule. Just make them actually filibuster. So we'll see where this goes. I hope that this is what happens, but I don't have a lot of, we got Lisa Murkowski on the Republican side and Susan Collins. I don't know. I don't have a lot of hope in these folks, but this absolutely could be done. And more importantly, this is a piece of legislation that is mind-numbingly simple to pass. Now, I don't have time to play the sound bites. It's in the stack of stuff. It'll go out in the newsletter as well. Chuck Schumer is on with Jake Tapper over the weekend talking about how this is Jim Crow laws 2.0. We talked about that recently on this program as well. It's preposterous to make such an allegation. But you go back to words of his in 1996, which is also in the stack of stuff. Go out in the newsletter. But Chuck Schumer is talking about the merits of voter identification. Anyway, that's what I've got time for today. Friends, investments are like seeds that you plant. They grow, they multiply, but are they bearing the kind of fruit that you want? At 48 Financial, they believe your money should reflect your values. They specialize in wealth management and biblically responsible investing, screening out companies that do not align with your faith. It's all part of their purpose-centered financial planning, helping you live a life of meaning and purpose. If you want to see if your investments align with your values or to what degree they do, all you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment at 48financial.com/Todd. That's 48financial.com/Todd. That assessment will tell you to what degree your current investments align with your values. 48 Financial, they're here to worry about your money so you don't have to. I'm here to worry about your Congress. I think that, I don't like the word worry here, but I think we should hold these folks accountable. And I think that that's ultimately what's going to move the needle here. If our representatives know that we're tired of playing games, we're tired of Republicans capitulating and running for the hills when things get tough, this can be done. I'm not sure they've got it in them, but folks, I hope they do. Got to go. SDG.